We begin today the Gemara, 6 lines down from the top of the page where it says Avoda. Okay, so the Gemara is continuing from the point that it said right before this regarding the halachas of yayin nesach, and Chacham were also geyser regarding the wine of a guy, stam yainov, is going to be aser because maybe he used it for Avoda Zara. So it brought before 3 opinions regarding a case where the guy just touched the wine. He didn't pour it. He wasn't meshachshech. He didn't have his hand splashing inside the wine. He just touched the wine. What happens now? So the Tanakama says that in such a case, this wine is mutter bahana. It's still also to drink because it still falls into the category of the wine of a guy that Chacham were geyser not to drink because of the Isser of Chasnos. But as far as the chash of yayin nesach, that doesn't apply if he just touches it. Then there was the opinion of Rab Nosson that said that if he touches it, it becomes aser bahana, just by touching it. It's in that category of yayin nesach. And then the third opinion, Rab Shimon, he says that if a guy just touches the wine, it's still completely mutter. Not only bahana, but it's completely mutter even to drink. Okay, so now in connection to this, the Gemara brings the following incident. There was this case that happened in the city Biram. There was this guy that was climbing up a palm tree, and he brings down branches from the tree with him. That is, he's bringing down his branches. As he's coming down from the tree, the tip of the lulav, which is a branch from the tree that he's holding in his hands, touched a barrel of wine. And it's shaloi b'chavana, was not intentional at all. But he did touch the wine. So Sharye Rav Lizvune Lo'ev Kechavim. So Rav said that you could have anar from this wine. You can sell it to a guy, which means that you can't drink from it because the guy touched it. So it becomes aser to drink, but it's still mutter b'hana. In other words, Rav is paskening like the opinion that I mentioned before, which is the opinion of the Chachamim, that in a case where a guy touches the wine, it becomes aser to drink, but you can still sell it. It's still mutter b'hana. Another thing to point out over here, and this is according to Rashi's opinion, we're talking over here about a case where the guy didn't even touch the wine himself directly. He touched the wine with the branch of the tree. But nevertheless, Rashi's opinion on this whole sugya here is that touching the wine directly or if the guy touches the wine with a branch is the same thing. It's an extension from his hand, he's touching with the branch, there's no difference. And therefore the same halacha applies. But Taisvis though brings another girsa here from Rabbeinu Chananel. Taisvis disagrees with this and says, according to Rabbeinu Chananel, there's another girsa in the Gemara. What happened is that as he's coming down from the tree, he touched the wine with his hands directly, not with a branch. Okay, those are the 2 I found out how to learn this Gemara. Okay, now Amru le Rav Kahana v'Ravasi le Rav. Rav Kahana Ravasi tell Rav, how could you say that in this case it'll be mutter to sell? It's mutter ba'ano. But v'hamaru da'amar, the master, Rav, you're the one that said, Tinik ben yaimai, a child, a guy that's a day old, who oise yayin nesach. If he touches the wine, then the wine becomes yayin nesach, which means that it's not necessary for the guy to have kavana that he wants to touch the wine. You know, he wants it for any purpose, but it just by mistake is touching, like a child a day old that by mistake his hand went into the wine, it becomes yayin nesach, which sounds like he's saying that it becomes asa bahana. So if the guy is coming down from this tree and by mistake with his branch, according to Rashi, he touched the wine, it should be yayin nesach, it should be asa bahana. Amalahu, so Rav answers, when I said this expression, that a baby, a guy, touches the wine, it becomes yayin nesach, what did I mean to say by this? B'shtiyah, that it becomes asa to drink. But bahana, mi amri, did I say that it becomes asa bahana? That's not what I meant. It doesn't become asa bahana, and therefore he paskin before that it could still be sold. Gufe, so here the Gemara brings this statement that Rav said and discusses the statement. So, Omar Rav, what did Rav say? Tinik ben yaimai, a child, a guy that's a day old, I say yayin nesach. If he touched the wine, and obviously it's shalei b'chavana at all, it's going to become yayin nesach. Which means, as the Rav just explained, that it becomes asa to drink, but it's still mutter b'hana. Eisvei, the question was asked to Rav from the following, Rav Shimi bar Chia le Rav, Rav Shimi bar Chia asks Rav from the following brayse. It says as follows, a person that buys a slave from a guy, shemalu v'loy tovlu. Now this slave, he had a bris, but he did not immerse in a mikveh, he did not tevel. What's the halacha usually of an Evet Kanani, a Goyish slave? That when you buy him as a slave, he's obligated to have a bris and also to go to the mikveh. And he goes to the mikveh, it's a certain level of gatus, not full gate. He's not going to the mikveh l'shem proper gatus, but he's going to the mikveh l'shem to be a Evet Kanani, which then, what happens then? He's going to be chayiv in mitzvahs like a woman. So that's what puts him into this category of an Evet Kanani, which is chayiv in mitzvahs to some degree. Okay, so now here we're talking about this Evet Kanani that did not have this tefillah. He had a bris, but v'loy tovlu. So if v'loy tovlu, he's really still a guy. Or v'chein b'nei hashvachis, so too the children of maidservants, of a Goyish maidservant, shemalu v'loy tovlu, that had a bris but did not go to the mikveh. So what we're talking about over here is that the mother, she did not go to the mikveh either. So therefore she's not a proper shivcha kananis, which has the halachas like a yid. So therefore now when she gives birth, so her children, if they are not going to go to the mikveh, they're not going to have this level of the gatus that there is by a Evet Kanani. So very similar to the first case. It was just a bris and no tefillah. So now what's the halacha? L'chayre, they're just like goyim. So the Braisa says, Rukan umedrasan, their spittle and their medris, which is medris when you step on something or you are leaning on any keli. Bishuk, even in the marketplace, tameh. It'll become tameh. Right, so this is the gzeira that there is beneged to goyim. A goy has a tumah like a zav. So the Braisa is saying, regarding these individuals, the same halacha applies, that their spittle and their medris will be tameh, and it's adding here even in the shuk. The reason it's adding even in the shuk is because usually the halacha is any tumah that there is in a reshus harabim, if it's a suffix, it's tahir. That's the klal. Over here it's saying though that their tumah is not a suffix. Their spittle and their medris is 100% tameh, and therefore even in the marketplace it'll be tameh. But for Amri law, there are others though that said tahir, that no, that they will the halacha of tumah will not apply to them. They will be tahir. Why are they tahir? L'chayra, they're goyim. If they did not do any tefillah, then they're goyim. So Rashi explains the reason why they're tahir is because who made this gzeira on goyim that their reik, their spittle or their medrash should be tameh? It's a gzeira of Chazal that should be like a zav. So Chazal would not geyser the gzeira by a milsa de loy shchicha, by a case which is not common. This case here of a guy that's an Evet Kanani that only had a bris but did not go to the mikveh, since it's loy shchiach, Chacham did not apply their gzeira to this case, and therefore they'll be tired. Okay, now we come to the part of the Braisa that's relevant for the question that we're asking here on Rav regarding the Yayin Nesach. So the Braisa goes on to say regarding these individuals, Yainon, their wine, Gedailem, if it's older, if they're older, they're more mature. Oisin Yayin Nesach, if they touch this wine, it becomes Yayin Nesach. Ketanim, however, if they're younger, Ein Oisin Yayin Nesach. If they touch it, it does not become Yayin Yet Nesach. Now the Braisa says, Hu ve'ela ein Gedailem ve'ela ein Ketanim. Who's considered to be mature and who's considered to be young? It doesn't go by the age of 13. So what's the two categories? Gedaila means Yaidim B'tiv Avedis Kechavim U'Mishamshah. Gedaila means that they understand the nature of Avoda Zara and serving Avoda Zara. So therefore, if they touch wine, so then because they know about Avoda Zara, it's included in the Gzeira of Chachamim that it becomes Aser for Yayin Esach. Ketanim, however, if they're younger, and Einam Yaidim B'tiv Avedis Kechavim Shamshah, they don't know the nature of Avoda Zara and what serves Avoda Zara, then what they touch will be mutter. So now, what do we see here from this Braisa? Ketani Miyah. So the Braisa is telling you, Gedailim in, that here we're talking about these Avodim Canaan that essentially are goyim, because they did not have they weren't taival. And what does it say? Gedailim in, that if they're old enough, they're mature to understand what Avodah Zara is, if they touch the wine, it becomes aser. Ketanim loy, but if they're children and they touch the wine, then it does not become aser. So how does Rav say that a tinik ben yoimei, a child, a day old, if you touch the wine, it becomes aser? Answers the Gemara, you have to understand this Braisa differently. Tirgema abenei shvachis. When it says over here that there's a difference between Gedalim and Ketanim, it's only regarding one case of this Braisa. It's only regarding the case of the Bnei Shvachis that were born in the house of a Yid. There's a certain mila to these Bnei Shvachis, even though they're really similar to the Avodim Kananim that were not Teivel. because they were also born from a mother that wasn't Tevel, and they only had a bris, but they did not have tefillah. But there's a mila to the bnei shvachis because they are born and are raised in the house of a yid. So because they're raised amongst Yidden, so here the Brisa is saying that as long as they're young enough that they don't know about Avoda Zara, so then we assume that they grew up in the house of a Yid and they have no connection to Avoda Zara. So if they touch it, it's not going to answer the wine. But 1 second. But b'negeya to the other case that it said in the Brisa, the Avodim Kenanim that were not Tevel, by them, because they didn't grow up in the house of a Yid, they grew up amongst Goyim. Here, the halacha that Rav said that even a katan, a tinnik, ben yaimai, that touches the wine will be aser. Okay, but now, 1 second. The Gemara asks on this, how could you make this distinction in the lashon of the Brisa? Ha-v'chein kama. The Brisa uses the term v'chein when it brings these two cases of the avodim that weren't tevel and the bnei shvachis that weren't tevel. It says v'chein, meaning that they're the same thing. V'chein kama. Says the Gemara, that v'chein that it's comparing the two, arukan umedrasan. It's only comparing them regarding the first halacha the Brisa spoke about, which is the halacha of tumah, regarding the spit and the medris. There, the halacha of tumah will be the same by the two. But regarding the halacha of yayin nesach, there's a difference. Only by the Evet Kanani that came from Goyim do I say that even a young child will make a tummy, like Rav said, but by the Shivcha, there's where what the Brisa says applies, that there's a difference between Gadol and Katan. Okay, so the Gemara says, now, we had two versions in the Brisa before. When it's speaking about the Tumah, is it saying that by both of them they're Tameh, or is it saying by both of them that it's Tahir? So the Gemara says, now, Tameh. According to the opinion that says that we're coming to say about these individuals that they're tamei, so then it makes sense why the Brisa would say v'chein. As Rashi explains, the Rashi, by the way, on this part of the Gemara is all in Amud Beis. So Rashi explains that the reason why it makes sense why it would say v'chein is because first you're telling me that this guy that did not have a tefillah and he comes from Goyim, that his spittle will be tamei, and then it adds v'chein, and so too even this shivcha that has a child, and now the child grows up in the house of a Yid, nevertheless, his spittle will also be tummy. There's a big chiddush to that. That's why I would add the v'chein to say this. But according to the other opinion, that we're not talking there about tumah, but it's the opposite. Second, where am I over here in the lashon of the Gemara? But according to the opinion that it's coming to say that there is no tumah, that's toy. So then, what's the v'chein? If you're telling me that by a guy that did not have a tefillah, and he grew up by Goyim, that over there he's going to be toy, automatically I already know that should apply the same by a child that grew up in the house of a Yid. Why would I think that he should be any more tamei than this guy that didn't grow up by Yid? So you can't say that the Brisa is saying v'chein to compare the two only regarding this halacha of tumah if the girsa here is that both of them are toy. So then, what are you going to say? Why is the Brisa saying it in this, or why is they comparing them here? According to the Pshat that the Gemara is saying here, so then there's two different halachas that this Brisa is speaking about. The first halacha is b'negei to tumah, and there it just has to say the halacha that a guy that had no tvila is tahir. It doesn't have to mention b'nei shvachas. That's self-understood. And then the second halacha, b'negei to the wine. What the Gemara just suggested is that halacha that we're making a distinction between gedalim and ketanim regarding wine is only b'negei to the b'nei shvachas, because they grew up in the house of a Yid. So let the ratio of the Mishnah that talks about tumah and tara say the halacha only b'negei to Evet Kanani that grew up by Goyim. And the Seif of the Brisa that talks about the wine, say the halacha only b'negei to the b'nei shvachas that grew up in the house of a Yid. And over here we're not geyser on the ketanim. That's how the Brisa should have said it. Okay, so therefore the Gemara says, the Gemara changes the answer over here. That Mashmalon. So the Gemara explains, so you're right. We have to say that when it's saying over here v'chein, it's comparing these two cases, the goy that is Evet Kanani, and then the b'nei shvachis. They both didn't have a proper tefillah, and it's comparing it is comparing them regarding the halacha of yayin nesach as well. Not only b'negei to the ratio of the Brisa regarding tumah and tara, but it's not comparing them 100%. It's comparing them regarding one detail. This is what this Brisa is coming to say. Avodim dumye the b'nei shvachis. We compare the Evet Kanani to the b'nei shvachis, and we say that ma b'nei shvachis, just like by the b'nei shvachis, malu v'loy tovlu. If they had a bris, but there was no tefillah, who the oisin yayin nesach, then the wine that they touch will be in yayin nesach. Malu v'tovlu. However, if they had a proper bris and they also went to a mikveh, then loy. So then they're yidden to some extent. They have halachas like yidden, and therefore it's not yayin nesach anymore. Af avodim came, the same also applies to avodim, that once they were tovel, then there's no din of yayin nesach anymore. So the point that the Gemara is saying over here is, it's coming to compare the two b'nigeh to this halacha, that once the Evet Kanani tovels, there's no din of yayin nesach anymore. But regarding the detail that we said, that there's a difference between gedolim and ketanim, there it's not comparing them. That difference between gedolim and ketanim is like the Gemara said before, that's only regarding the b'nei shvachas that grew up in the house of a yid. There I say that while there's a cotton, he can't make yayin nesach. But by a guy that did not grow up in the house of a yid, he will make a yayin nesach. Like Rav said, even a tinnik ben yaim. The comparison is only going to get to the general halacha that once they tovel, there's no yayin nesach anymore. Now what's the chiddush of this? Why would I think once they toveled, there should be yayin nesach? So the Gemara says, La fukim de Rav Nachman o Mashmol. This excludes what Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel. Dam Rav Nachman o Mashmul, halekech avadim and oivik kechavim. You buy an evet from a guy, afal pisha malu v'tov. Even after this guy had a bris and he toveled properly, nevertheless, oisin yayin nesach. The wine that he touches will make yayin nesach. Until when? At shetishka avedis kechavim mipiem. Until Avoda Zara is forgotten from this guy. This guy grew up as a guy and he's accustomed to Avoda Zara, and now you're buying him as an Evet Kanani. He's not becoming a full ger. He's becoming an Evet Kanani with a bris and with tefillah, but he still has Avoda Zara in his system. So you have to wait until he forgets about Avoda Zara. Only then will it not be yayin nesach. That's what Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel. So according to Rav's pshat in this brayse, kamash malon delay. This brayse teaches me no, that's not true. That as soon as he tovels, now whatever he touches will not be yayin nesach. That's the point of this brayse, and that's the comparison that it's making between the avodim and the bnei shvachas that grew up in the house of a yid. Okay, so now the Gemara brings this statement that Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, and we'll discuss this. So Gufe Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel halakech avodim and oivdik kechavim afal bishamal v'tovlu. You buy a eved Kanani even though he did a bris and he did tefillah, but nevertheless oisi yayin nesach. The wine he touches will still be yayin nesach until when? Achatishka avedis kechavim mipiem, until you know that they forgot about their old ways. He forgot about Avoda Zara. Now v'kama, how long is that? Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It is achneim asa chodesh, until 12 months. That's how long it takes for him to forget about his Avoda Zara. As the Rishonim point out, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi did not say this regarding this point to explain what Shmuel said. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was before Shmuel. He's even brought as a Tana in the Mishnah. So he said this regarding a different Indian, that 12 months is the length of time when you forget something. So therefore, this applies here as well, that this Evet Kanani, after 12 months, we assume that he forgot of his Avoda Zara. Okay, now here, the Gemara is basically going to go through the same discussion that we just had over here, and the Chazara, all using the same brayse, a question on what Shmuel said. So Eisvei Rabba le Rav Nachman, Rabba asked Rav Nachman from this brayse. So the brayse says, Lekech avodim v'noivdik kechavim shemalu v'loy tovlu. You're buying these avodim kananim that only had a bris but did not go to the mikveh. V'chein b'nei shvachas shemalu v'loy tovlu, the children of maidservants that grew up in the house of a yid, but they were born from a mother that did not have tefillah, and therefore they also did not have tefillah. So first version is rukon or medrasan b'shuk. Their spittle or their medris, even in the marketplace, tameh, will be tameh. V'amri la, but others say chachamim were not geyser in this case, and tahir. It will be tahir. Then the Braisa says, Yeinon, their wine, Gedolim. So if they're mature, they're older, Oisin Yain Nesach. What they touch will be Yain Nesach. Ketanim, when they're younger, Ein Oisin Yain Nesach. It will not be Yain Nesach. Eilen, Gedolim, Eilen, Ketanim, who's considered to be older and who's considered to be younger. Gedolim means Sheyedim B'tiv Avedis Kechavim Mishamsheh, if they know the nature of Avoda Zara. Ketanim is She'en Yedim B'tiv Avedis Kechavim Mishamsheh, they don't yet know what Avoda Zara is about and how it's served. Therefore, if they touch, it will not become Aser. So what do we see here? Ketani miyis, this Braisa says that malu v'loy tovlu, only in the case of these avodim kananim, they did not go to the mikveh in, then it'll be a problem that what they touch will become yayin nesach if they are old enough and they know what Avoda Zara is about. But malu v'tovlu, but you understand from this Braisa, a evet kanani, once he did have a proper mila and a proper tvila, then loy, then he will not make anything Yayin Nesach. The Brisa is clearly saying we're talking about not the regular kind of Eved Kanani. We're only talking about Eved Kanani that did not have a tefillah. So this is a question of Shmuel that says that every Eved Kanani had a proper milah, proper tefillah, you still have to wait another 12 months for him to forget about his Avoda Zara. So here again, the Gemara goes through the same answer, the same discussion. So Tergeme, he'll explain you, Shmuel can explain and say that Abnei Shvachis, that when it makes over here this distinction and it says that only because he didn't have a proper tefillah, therefore, in this case, it's gonna make Yayin Nesach, that's by the Bnei Shvachis. They grew up in the house of a Yid. So there the issue will be only if they did not go to the mikveh. But if it's an Eved Kanani that was bought from Goyim, and he's accustomed to Avoda Zara, there the halacha of Shmuel would still apply, that you have to wait 12 months. In fact, the Gemara, how could you make this distinction? But v'chein katani, it says v'chein, which is equating the two. Answers the Gemara, like we said before, arukan umedrasan. We're equating them only regarding the first halacha of the Brisa, regarding the halacha of Tumah, that they're spittle and they're medris. The halacha of Tumah, there is where they're the same. Says the Gemara, according to the opinion that says that it'll be that they're going to be tomei, so you could understand what's the chiddush here. That not only a Eved Kachavim, a Eved Kanani that was bought from Goyim, his spittle will be tomei, but also by the Bnei Shvachas that grew up in the house of a Yid. But according to the opinion that says that the status here is tahir, so then my ikalamema. What are you going to say? Why does the Bryce have to say v'chein? That not only the guy will be tahir, also the Bnei Shvachas that grew up in the house of the Yid will be tahir. That's self-understood. They grew up in the house of Yid. There's more of a svara that they should be tahir. So therefore the Gemara says, you're right, we're going to have to say that the v'chein here is comparing between these Avodim Kanana that came from Goyim and the Bnei Shvachas that grew up in the house of Yid, that we're comparing them regarding Yayin Nesach. And Hakamash Malon, this is what it's coming to say. The comparison is Avodim Dumye the Bnei Shvachas. We're comparing these Avodim to the Bnei Shvachas that grew up in the house of Yid. Ma Bnei Shvachas, just like by the Bnei Shvachas, Gedolim Hu Doisen Yayin Nesach. When they're older, they're mature, then they make Yayin Nesach. Ketanim Ein Yoisen Yayin Nesach. But if they're Ketanim, then there is no Yayin Nesach. Af Avodim Nami, so similar also regarding the Avodim, so Gedolim Oisen Yayin Nesach. When they're Gedolim, then they will cause it to be Yayin Nesach, but Ketanim Ein Oisen Yayin Nesach. But Ketanim will not make Yayin Nesach. In other words, the point that the Bryce is comparing the two is regarding this distinction between Gedolim and Ketanim. But they're not fully compared, because Benegayah to the Avodim Kananim that were bought from Goyim, according to Shmuel's opinion, there you have to wait 12 months until they will not make Yayin Nesach. Regarding the Shivcha, over there you don't have the Bnei Shvachas, that is, you don't have to wait 12 months because they grew up in the house of a Yid. So regarding that detail, we're not comparing them. We're comparing them only regarding this distinction between Gedolim and Ketanim. And what's the point of this comparison here? La fuke miderab. According to what Shmuel says, this brisa is actually coming to exclude from what Rav said. Rav had said that Tinik ben Yoimai Eisen Yayin Nesach. Rav holds that there's no difference between Gedolim and Ketanim when it comes to a Evet Kanani that was bought from Goyim. Over there, even a Tinik ben Yoimai will make Yayin Nesach. So Kamash Molan Deloy, this Braise, according to Shmuel, is actually coming to exclude from Rav's opinion to say that there's always a distinction between Gedolim and Ketanim. A guy which is a Tinnik ben Yaima, a Katan, will not make Yayin Nesach. So as you see over here, in the way to explain this Braise, you have the way Rav explains it, and you have the way Shmuel explains it. The way Rav explains it in Amar Aleph is he's saying that this Braise is coming to compare the Oivik Kachavim, the Kanani that was bought from Goyim, to the Bnei Shvachis, regarding what point? He's coming to compare them, like the Gemara said in Amar Aleph, regarding the point that as soon as there's Tefillah, there's no more Yayin Nesach. Adarabah, the Braise is actually coming to exclude from what Shmuel said. Shmuel said that by an Evet Kanani that comes from Goyim, you have to wait an additional 12 months. According to Rav, no, this Braise is actually coming to say you don't have to wait an additional 12 months. Tvila, that's it. There's no more Yayin Nesach. According to Shmuel, it's the exact opposite. This Braise is coming to say that by both the Eved Kanani that comes from Goyim or by the Bnei Shvachas that grew up in the house of a Yid, there's always a difference between whether they're Gedolim and Ketanim. And a Katan that doesn't know Avoda Zara will not make Yayin Nesach. And it's coming to exclude from what Shmuel said, that it's coming to exclude from what Rav said that is. According to Shmuel. It's coming to exclude from what Rav said that there is no distinction between Gedalim and Ketanim. So here, according to Shmuel, Adarabba, this Braisa is coming to make that distinction between Gedalim and Ketanim. So it's the same Braisa, but you can learn it like Rav and like Shmuel. Okay.